Hello, everyone. My name is Gus.
Hi, I'm Woody.
Today we have, I don't know how to say it. It's a combo video. Somebody sent us this stuff. By the way, we have the best subscribers. They send us some of these videos. I'm like, what are you guys watching that you're ran upon this? Like, what's your algorithm?
But I'm looking at the screen and this could be the most depressing screen I've ever seen in diving.
Yes. So this one talks about cave diving and cave-related accidents, and people have suggested that we react to it. I haven't seen this one. You haven't seen this one. So I don't know how much value we're going to add, but let's just give it a shot.
Not much, like usual.
The Manchester Hole Tragedy. In November 2005, 14-year-old Joseph Lister, along with 10 classmates, including his friends Charlie and Amy from his school, his math teacher, and a 17-year-old caver volunteer who knew the cave system well, decided to explore the Nidderdale Caves in North Yorkshire, England. The cave system is famous for its 20 entrances, and the group chose to enter through Manchester Hole, a small opening in the ground that leads to a huge cave. They descended through a hole into a massive chamber, about the size of a football field, with a few inches of water on the floor and a 50-foot-high ceiling hung with stalactites. After passing through, they entered a tunnel and climbed down a muddy path into a second, smaller chamber that still held all 11 students and had shallow water. The tunnel then narrowed sharply, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees for 40 feet through twisting passages. At the bottom, a muddy stream soaked their clothes, but led to a small chamber where they could stand again. The math teacher was the last to follow the group. When he reached the small chamber, the guide became very worried because the water level was much higher than usual, something he had never seen before. Even though it was cold and windy outside, there was no forecast of rain. Everyone was standing in freezing water. Their boots were filled with water, and there was hardly any space to move. To make matters worse, the water kept rising, soon reaching above the knees of some students. The guide, confused by the sudden flooding, knew they had to get out quickly, so they decided to retreat. The math teacher went first, followed by the students, one by one, taking the small passage back to the previous chamber. At one point, the teacher and 9 of the students were inside the tunnel when a sudden surge of cold water flooded the chamber. The guide, along with Amy and Joseph, were the last to exit the chamber and enter the tunnel.
By the way, assuming this was all right, because we don't know if they made it or not, it's this hearsay, but shouldn't the teachers be last? Like, okay, all the students go, I'll go last. Like, like when the captain goes down with the ship type of thing?
Yeah, you would think so. This kind of reminds me, though, of what are you thinking of? I'm thinking of the Thai rescue. Same type of thing. A bunch of kids went in, the water was low, then it rose, and then...
Yeah.
But it is interesting. They're saying there was no rain, but that's how quickly, when you're out
Things can change.
Yeah, like I've done some slot canyoneering in Utah, and they warn you it can be perfectly sunny 10 miles away.
What type of canyoneering you said?
Slot canyoneering.
Oh, okay, I heard something else.
And 10 miles away, it could rain, and a flash flood can come in instantly. Within 5 minutes, you're stuck, you're dead, you can't get out. So you got to be careful.
Yeah.
The tunnel was crowded with students struggling against the rising water. Realizing the danger, the guide, Amy, and Joseph went back to the previous chamber to catch their breath. But the water kept rising, and they were nearly submerged. Taking a deep breath, they re-entered the tunnel. This time, the tunnel was clear enough for them to move. The guide led the way, with Amy and Joseph following closely. However, in the previous chamber, the guide pushed Amy out to safety, but Joseph never made it out. The water continued to rise, even in the chamber. The guide tried to go back for Joseph, but the math teacher insisted on taking the other 10 students to safety. Tragically, Joseph drowned in the narrow tunnel, where there was no air. After the incident, the group went to the surface to alert emergency personnel, and they emerged under a blue sky with strong winds, but not a single drop of rain. It was later revealed that strong winds had blown water out of the nearby Scar House Reservoir that day. Thousands of gallons of water were forced into the river below, causing it to rise 4 feet in just 1 hour. This surge of water drained directly into the cave system. Normally, water slowly trickles through and seeps into the groundwater, but that day, the huge volume overwhelmed the cave's ability to drain, triggering flash flooding throughout the system in just a few minutes. Cave rescuers arrived within 20 minutes after being called. By then, the water had already receded to below their knees. They found the lifeless body of Joseph Lister in the narrow tunnel before the final chamber. Neil Moss incident. It was...
Before we go to the Neil Moss incident or whatever, this is yet another example of why cave diving is safer than caving. I've always said that, and people make fun of me, and they're like, you're an idiot, you don't know what you're talking about. Caving is way safer. No, it's not. At least in my opinion, it's not. Because when you're caving, you can fall and break stuff. You can have a flash flooding and drown. Like, there's all kinds of issues that you have to deal with. Whereas with cave diving, the only issue is, okay, you don't have unlimited air to breathe. But, like, what's the point of having unlimited air to breathe if the air is filled with water and then you drown?
But are there more cave diving deaths than dry caving deaths? I'm posing that as a question.
I don't know, like, the amount, but obviously I think there's a lot more people that do dry caving than cave diving. So if I had to guess, I would say more people die doing caving, but there's a lot more people doing caving too. So it's not a fair comparison.
I don't know if that's true or not.
But then injuries. What about injuries? How many people break their legs and...
Yeah, that I was just talking about that last
Yeah.
night at dinner. Like if you're in those slot canyons in Utah and you break your leg, I don't see how they get you out. There's no way they can airlift you out. You're in tiny slot canyons, which can fill up with water.
Yeah.
And they also have keeper pools there. It's called a keeper pool.
So you
which
fall
means
and...
you fall in, it keeps you because
Keeps you
it's
forever.
it's a completely the wall is like glass. What are you going to grab onto to climb
can't.
out?
You just tread water until
It's a
you
keeper
die of
pool.
exhaustion.
And you fall in that
Beautiful.
keeper pool. You don't know if there was something protruding straight up. That could
Yeah.
just be like, I don't know if that's the right symbol, but
That's probably... Well, maybe for those kinds of canyons that you're going in.
I think it's appropriate.
But I will say that all of this is a good reminder that if you appreciate your life, you should cave dive because it's much safer.
Yeah,
Sunday,
Maybe the
March
first ever to say
22nd,
that.
1959, when 20-year-old Oxford philosophy student Oscar Neil Moss, along with 7 other people, 4 of whom were part of the British Caving Association, decided to visit Peak Cavern in the village of Castleton, Derbyshire. The cave system was well known. However, 2 weeks earlier, the same 4 BCA explorers had discovered a new fissure in a side chamber that was 1,000 feet deep. The 8
Dang.
explorers entered the cave system in the afternoon. They were equipped with ropes, lamps, helmets, and other necessary caving materials. Upon entering, they discovered the Mucky Ducks section, a wet squeeze tunnel that was frequently flooded after rain. This led them to the Boulder Passage, an easier section where they could stand upright while descending and maneuver around various obstructions. Approximately 493 feet into the passage, a 10-feet climb on the north wall of the upper gallery awaited them. High above the steep, muddy slopes was Pickering Passage, a long, narrow crawl space where you had to stretch your whole body to move through.
That
It
thing
concluded
looks
with
bad.
an awkward bend and a muddy sump. Above the eye hole, just large enough to accommodate a human body, laid the next challenge. It led to a thigh-deep, muddy pool that connected to the stalagmite chamber, a vast, beautiful part of the cave filled with stalagmites, with
Well,
a
those
ceiling
are
high enough for a
stalactites,
person
but,
to stand
like,
upright.
yeah.
Despite their fatigue, they
Whatever.
approached the newly discovered fissure in the ground. The shaft measured around 3.2 feet by 2.3 feet.
Oh.
None had ventured all the way down there, but it was estimated to be at least 40 feet deep. To be safe, they
Dang.
decided to deploy a 250 feet climbing
be
ladder,
safe.
and Neil volunteered to go down. He started to descend around 3:30 p.m., pushing the ladder before continuing. He went down 12 feet when he met his first challenge, the corkscrew twist. He succeeded in pushing himself into a 10-foot-long, slightly inclined passageway, and then crawled through it, pushing the ladder as he went. Afterwards, he came face to face with a vertical passageway 18 feet deep, a section none had ventured into before. Throughout his descent, he maintained constant communication with his team above. Excited, Moss dropped further down the tunnel, but unfortunately, he met a boulder there. He knew he couldn't continue descending, so he decided to climb back up. Unfortunately, Moss found himself unable to lift his feet sufficiently to ascend the ladder. He
Got
became
stuck.
trapped in an elliptical crevice only 18 inches wide. He called out for assistance, and despite efforts to lift him by pulling on the ladder, it became jammed between the cave surface and his body. Ropes were lowered to help him, but every time they tried to pull him up, they either snapped or got cut by the sharp edge of the rock. His body ended up blocking air from getting into the shaft, so he needed to be rescued immediately before he ran out of oxygen. Some of the cavers left to seek...
Wait, do you understand that? I don't understand that.
I didn't either.
I don't really understand how his body blocked air from getting into the cave. I'm confused. Your head's sticking up. The air's coming from above you. Anyway, I'm sure you guys can comment on that because I don't understand that
No,
last
that
part.
doesn't. The fact that he's in there makes no sense to
I
begin
get
with,
that he's
but-
stuck and his legs jammed in there and you're going to die of starvation, but I don't get
If
that
he
you
was,
don't have air.
if he was stuck upside down,
Right.
then
That's
it would
different.
make sense.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good. I'm glad I asked a question that you didn't understand either. Of course, you and I.
nobody does.
usually don't understand.
more help. Within a few hours, hundreds of volunteers from across England, along with the Royal Air Force, police, and even the Navy, joined the rescue efforts. Just a
ready
few
to go,
hours after
100 people,
Moss
like-
became trapped in the shaft, the rescuers encountered another obstacle. By this time, the air in the shaft had become polluted by carbon dioxide. Moss became disoriented because of it, and he began behaving irrationally. Witnesses said that he wasn't helping at all, that he didn't seem to care about
don't
how
know why.
serious
I
the
don't
situation
understand
was, and that he even told the rescuers to take a break to get something to eat. Experienced cavers were sent down the shaft to rescue Moss, but one by one, they were forced back by the toxic air. 3 of the volunteers even lost consciousness. Finally, the 4th volunteer, Ron Peters, managed to secure a rope around Moss's chest and began to pull. However, he soon realized that this only worsened Moss's breathing difficulties. The Royal Air Force brought oxygen tanks to ventilate the shaft, and although the quality of air was marginally improved,
I
it
think I
proved
may
to be
understand.
insufficient. The
So look, let's say let's say where you're blocking it is your head. Okay, so your head. So let's say your head is blocking everything from above you.
Okay.
If you're breathing in and out of a small area below you, eventually that's going to become full of CO2 because the air above you can't get in because they can see your head, but they can't get below your head. I don't know if his head was that wedged. That's the
No,
only
but they
way
just
that makes
said
sense.
they just said that this guy tied a rope around his chest.
I
Then
missed that.
Then that's how
Yeah,
is it so
okay,
wedged
okay,
that you can
yeah,
get a rope?
okay.
Yeah.
Next morning, 18-year-old June Bailey arrived and suggested breaking Neil's collarbone to help rescue him. However,
Bro.
the toxic air stopped
Imagine.
all their
This
efforts,
guy's
and
a
they had to turn back. By Monday afternoon,
complete
roughly
animal.
24 hours after Moss entered the cave, he was still breathing, but it started to rain, and the entire cave was evacuated as a precaution. When it stopped, the rescuers went back to the shaft accompanied by a Royal Air Force doctor. They did not hear a sound. Moss was not breathing, and he was declared dead on Tuesday, March 24,
Dang,
1959. Throughout the ordeal, Moss's father, Eric Moss, stayed at the entrance and asked that his son's body remain where it was to avoid risking further injury or loss of life during the rescue. The shaft was sealed with rocks from the stalagmite chamber. That chamber, which held the shaft, later became known as the Moss Chamber, his final resting place. The Manatee
Dang.
Springs Cave.
So, I still don't really understand what happened. I mean, it seems like he suffocated and died. But here's another example. I think that this guy would have survived, or potentially would have survived, if he was cave diving, because you then eliminate the gravity pulling force on you and wedging you. That's the thing, when you're cave diving, people are concerned that you're gonna get wedged, and you do get wedged. But because you're not falling with gravity, where like a rock can wedge you in or whatever, you rarely get wedged to the point that somebody cannot pull you out. And that happened a couple times on the last trip we did to Cozumel. I remember I was exploring behind somebody. I was second, and we were like just army crawling through this thing, and I noticed the ceiling had a lot of edges and stuff. And next thing I know, he's not moving backwards or forwards or anything. He's just there. And I just grabbed the fins and pulling to me. Then I wedge myself back out, pull again. And like I did that for like, I don't know, 10 feet or whatever. And then he was able to get himself out. So because you don't have that gravity, even though you're wedged, it's a lot easier to pull you out.
Yeah, and I'm coming at it from a little bit of a different angle than you, but coming to the same agreement.
Yeah.
That cave diving may actually be safer. And here's why.
There you go.
Okay, but different.
Coming around.
I think more untrained people are
Yeah.
willing to go into a dry cave than cave dive. And those untrained
True.
people have never been in there. They come in with a pair of sneakers and they bought a little
Crocs.
hat. They got a hat. They got a light. They're like, I'm capable now. That's all I needed.
Yeah.
And that's really dangerous because these are technical. Like we know somebody who is just a dry caver.
Yeah.
This guy's got years of training. He's taking courses. There's more gear in his truck than I even know what to think of, right? I think that may be one of the bigger reasons why dry caving is more dangerous than cave diving.
Because
You
of the
don't-
lack of training.
You
and
don't
expertise.
see many people. You do see some. We've had videos on that. But usually it's properly trained cave divers entering the cave. So anyway,
But I do want to hear from
may
people
be right.
if you're watching this and you think dry caving is safer than cave diving, just comment below. Why? But don't just say because there's air, because this guy had air and died. All right. So your comment, because there's air, has been proven wrong already within this video. So give me other ideas. Like, why do you think dry caving is safer when everything indicates to me that it's way more dangerous?
I look forward to them watching our dry caving video while you're just
okay.
crawling, wedging through that stuff.
All right. Well, the next one is Manatee Springs.
You're tiny now. You can go through anything.
That's new camera. But Manatee Springs, we've been there. We've done Manatee Springs together. So let's see what this one is.
Diving tragedy. On March 14th, 2022, a couple of friends, William and Harry, and their respective fathers, George and Jack, decided to visit the Manatee Springs State Park in Florida to do some cave diving. At Manatee Springs State Park, divers need to have full cave diving certification and must dive with a partner who has previous diving experience at Manatee in order to access the cave area. All 4 divers had only the intro to cave diving certification, not the full one. The Manatee Springs system is known for its 4 entry points. Manatee Springs, mainly for open water divers, Catfish Hotel, Sue's Sink, and Freedman's Sink. The cave tunnels below these points extend for thousands of feet, but only Freedman's Sink and Catfish Hotel have an entrance pool for cave divers. The system is called a siphon because water flows like a river from a distant entry point and naturally comes out at Manatee Springs. Due to this flow, cave divers typically enter at one point and exit downstream at another. This type of dive, known as a traverse, is more challenging because divers must know 2 pathways instead of just one. Entering a siphon and a traverse system was only allowed for full certified cave divers. Regardless,
Wait, it's a siphon? It seems he said the water was flowing out, so that's a spring.
Okay, so
a
here's
siphon means the water's flowing in, so you get in easy, and then it's hard to get out. That's why a siphon's more dangerous. So I don't know if he just mixed that up.
Okay, so
cave divers know what I'm talking about.
So here's the reality about it. So number one, I know exactly what he's talking about right now. This is an incident that happened a couple of years ago with people. I know their real names is not Harry and whatever he said, and he actually put a comment below that said fictitious names are being used for simplicity. I know these guys. We actually had them. We reacted to one of their videos in Dive Talk. I'm not gonna say which one because, again, I don't want to throw spotlight on them. But the point is, they were there. What he's talking about is Manatee Springs has the Manatee Springs entrance, but that entrance has been like collapsed with rocks and stuff. You can't go through it, or people don't go through it, that entrance. So what you do is you go through another entrance and then you start going against the current. So you start going against the spring. But if you miss that exit and you go to Manatee, you can get wedged pretty bad. And there's actually people who have died at Manatee Springs. It's not this specific story, but they have died because they got wedged. They couldn't get out of that exit and they kept going to Manatee Springs, and then they got wedged into the rock against the current. The current at Manatee Springs is gnarly. Like, I remember we did that dive with DPVs and we were maxing it at like 8, 9, like just to move.
Yep.
And I was like, who is doing this cave with no DPVs? Like, who's swimming this thing? It's nuts. So what people do is, and he's explaining it, is that instead of swimming against the current and then out, which is what we did, we went in on an entrance, went in a while, and then came out through the same entrance. So we didn't do a traverse, which is what he's talking about. But a lot of people do traverses because they don't want to swim against that flow. The flow is nuts. And the cave is up and down. I don't know if you remember that cave. It's big. It's not small. But it's up and down and up and down. It's like a roller coaster. So, yeah, pretty gnarly.
They decided to enter the system at Freedman's Sink and planned to exit at Catfish Hotel. They started their dive at 11:17 a.m. Each diver equipped with 2 air tanks, both filled to 3,800 psi. Since the tunnels were about
PSI,
100
not
feet
PSIs.
deep, roughly 4 atmospheres of pressure, the air was compressed to 1/4 of its original volume and consumed at 4 times the surface rate. They all carried both primary and backup light sources, as well as dive computers to track their depth, heart rate, movement, and time.
Okay. I don't know about heart rate.
Yeah, maybe is that a new Garmin? That's the newest Garmin. It just came out.
No. It doesn't track
sac rate, maybe
it
breathing
doesn't track
rate.
your,
I think you meant sac rate.
But anyway, computers track your time underwater, your depth, and your exposure to nitrogen,
and your surface air consumption rate.
Yeah, and well, if you have a transmitter, so it knows how much air.
That must have been what he meant.
Yeah, I think he doesn't know that part. But anyway, they don't track your heart rate. Typically, and maybe when if you're watching this video 10 years from now and they do, then you don't call us idiots. I'm talking about right now in 2025. They
10
don't.
years from now, they'll be tracking your blood and everything.
Everything. But anyway, well, the other thing that he mentioned is the traverse. And I want to explain really quick the way traverses are done safely. So if you're going to do a traverse, and we did one with Jonathan Bird when we did the Grand Traverse at Peacock Springs, you need to go to the exit, in this case, Catfish Hotel, and lay a line from the open water to the cave diving main line, the primary line in the cave, right? You do that because one of the rules of cave diving is you must have a continuous guideline to the surface. So the cave, the line inside the cave, the guideline inside the cave is not available typically on the open water. And that is to discourage non-cave divers from going into the cave. So what we do as cave divers is we tie on the open water into a tree trunk, a rock, whatever, a brick, whatever is available. And then we run that and we do we have a process in which we tie this line all the way to the primary line in the cave. And then we use the primary guideline in the cave to actually do the dive. So to do it safely, and you see it on the video, I'm going to link it at the end of this video, so please stay tuned for that. You first do a dive just to lay the line at the exit, because that's the line that you're going to use once you reach the exit to go to the open water and, end your dive.
And you may even put 100% O2 there, right? You dropped it off there. You're also proving that
the exit is viable.
Is able to be exited.
Correct. So that's how you do it. So you do that.
You're
set up
smart. Did you get your PhD?
Not
recently?
Yet, but I'm working on it.
Like it's your better.
So you set up the exit before you do the dive. So dive number 1 is typically pretty short, 15, 20 minutes, whatever. Set up the exit. We're good. You set up a bottle for emergencies, whatever. We're good. All right, we're ready. You get out of the water, go all the way to the entrance, and then do the traverse.
Additionally, William and Harry had a GoPro in their head to document the entire dive. William and Harry took the lead, with their dads following closely behind. The gentle pull of the water from Friedman's sink helped them cover the 1,700 feet distance to Catfish Hotel. After the first 900 feet, they came to an exit line at Sue's sink. A rope tied to a rock marked the spot, and light from the surface was seeping into the tunnel. This exit was meant for emergencies only, because it wasn't set up for divers, but for campers. Their planned exit, Catfish Hotel, was 700 feet away. They kept diving and eventually reached the end of the route near Manatee Springs, but they couldn't see the exit line to Catfish Hotel. Confused, they started searching for any light coming from above, but found nothing. Fathers and sons teamed up and decided to return by following the line. At that moment, George had 3,000 psi of air remaining, which was enough to exit safely.
Going against that
so let me add some clarity here. So here's what happens. They, of course, did not do that first dive to set up the exit on the traverse. They just went to the entrance, and then they were like, we get to Catfish Hotel, and then we'll find the exit, right? But they've never done that dive from Catfish Hotel. They were not familiar with it. So what they did is they get to the exit, to the end of the line at Catfish Hotel, and then they're like, okay, where do we go for the exit? They don't have a guideline to the open water. So they're like, okay, well, let's tie here and swim that way. Oh, no, it's not that way. Let's swim that way. It's not that way. Oh, go that way. And apparently they spent a considerable amount of time trying this out. Let's say 15 minutes. I'm not sure of 100% of the details, but they could not find the exit. I mean, people that say is like, why do you even need a guideline? You can just follow the features of the cave.
No way.
You will not know where you are. Even you can dive that cave 20 times and you're coming out and you're like, is it that way or this way? You don't know. So these guys tied to the end of the line and they're going in all directions. They cannot find it. They're trying to swim to see if they see some glare. The problem with Catfish Hotel is the duckweed. It's like bad. I mean, it's completely covered by duckweed, which is this plant that floats.
Green little leaves everywhere.
So it blocks the sun from coming through. You can't see it. So they are like, we can't see the sun. Guys, we have to head back. We cannot find the exit, head back. Now, obviously, because I know what happened and I'm not going to spoil it, what they should have done is continue to look for the exit, and I think they would have eventually find it. They had enough air that they could have searched for an hour, and eventually, probably, they would have found the exit. But what they decided is they searched for like 10, 15 minutes, I'm not sure, and then they were like, guys, we have enough air to go back. Let's just swim back, and let's see what happens.
However, the return trip turned out to be more difficult than expected. They were moving against the current, so
bad
their
they didn't
air
have a
consumption
rebreather.
increased rapidly as their breathing rate went up. Finally, George spotted the exit at Sue's sink and noticed light leaking from the surface. George and his son William emerged from the system at 12 p.m. However, their friends didn't make it out. Something had gone wrong. William wanted to dive back down to find Harry and Jack, but George insisted on calling 911 instead. Harry and Jack had apparently missed the exit at Sue's sink. Their lighting equipment washed out the natural light leaking from the surface.
Yeah, the problem with Sue's sink is that it is an emergency exit, and if I remember correctly, the line is tied into the wall, but the wall is like behind it. Like, I'm gonna use this bottle for a reason. So when you're swimming, you see the line going up in the wall, like you see it on the right. You're passing it with the flow. Oh, there's the line to Sue's sink. You can see it, but on the way back, you're swimming this way, and the line is behind this wall, and every wall looks like the wall. So I mean, unless you're stopping after every single wall to check to see if there's a line back there, you're going to miss it, which is what these guys did. They missed it.
And boulders further blocked it, so they didn't see the exit. They
to
continued
your
diving
point.
desperately for another 20 minutes, searching for any exit. Finally, Harry spotted the light at Friedman's sink. Rushing ahead along
Made
the
it all the way
guideline,
to the
he looked
entrance.
back to see his dad's camera light following him. Harry managed to exit the system at 12:20 p.m. with one tank completely empty and the other below 1,500 psi, but his father Jack did not emerge. William and George met up with Harry at Friedman's sink, and they talked about why they had missed the exit at Catfish Hotel. They later realized there was no upline leading to Catfish Hotel. Deep inside the cave, they could see light from the surface, but it was partly blocked by a 10-foot deep passage arranged in a double L shape, a detail they wouldn't have known without prior experience. In fact, many divers enter through Catfish Hotel and exit at Friedman's sink because it's easier, even though they have to dive against the current. Cave rescuers arrived around 12:50 p.m. and found Jack's lifeless body just 100 feet from the exit at Friedman's sink. Both of his tanks were completely empty. He had traveled 3,400 feet through the system and ran out of air in the last 100 feet. His final movement was recorded at 12:17 p.m., just 3 minutes before his son surfaced and 17 minutes after his friends surfaced at Sue's sink. If you liked this video, subscribe for
Well, this is another one of those where they violated one of the 5 rules of cave diving.
Well, they shouldn't have been there because they were intro to cave. That they did.
Okay,
they
so
get this
training,
accurate.
that's one of the 5 rules.
Of course.
They violated guideline to the surface, right?
Yep.
We have these 5 rules. I don't know about their air. I'd have to, that's one of the rules, to have
Yeah.
enough air and use a third.
And
all
lights and things. But yeah, I mean, they went into a cave they've never dived before.
Mm-hmm.
They did a traverse, which they shouldn't have done because they weren't trained to do a traverse. They didn't do that initial dive to set up the guideline to the surface. I mean, it was on and on and on, a series of mistakes and oversight. And, the video that we reacted about them, it was the same story. It was, they were doing stuff that they shouldn't have been doing, and they survived on that one, obviously. But they were like, well, never again. We won't be reckless again. And then this happened.
Yeah. And then to even go a little further, boy, we could say we actually believe rebreather cave diving is even that much safer than dry caving. Boy, if he would have been on a rebreather, he would have a lot more time. He was only 100 feet away. He would have been fine.
Yep.
He was right there. 100 feet.
Yep,
Unbelievable.
absolutely. But yeah, it was a very sad story, a fatality. Now, people watching this are going to be like, see, if the cave was dry, he would have survived. So now we're back around. It's like a full circle. We were just talking about how much cave diving was safer than dry caving. Well, it came back around. This is a good evidence that we don't watch these videos ahead of time, because I was talking so much, before, and now if the cave was dry, this guy probably would have survived. But the point is, I think if he had a rebreather, he probably would have made it.
Yes.
Although, even with rebreathers, they shouldn't have done this dive,
Of course.
because they weren't trained for it and they didn't prepare for it properly.
Definitely.
And they weren't ready for it. I think that besides the fact that there was a loss of life, which I never want to see people in cave diving, whether they're cave certified, non-cave, I don't care. People shouldn't die diving. I don't want to see that. But besides that, I think the other thing that made me sad about this whole thing is that Jonathan Bird, our friend from Blue World, got a lot of flack over the fact that he did this traverse safely, his full cave train. He did the checking of the exit, lane line. He did everything by the book. And he got a lot of flack from the cave diving community, Shocker, yeah. That obviously, unless they're the one doing it,
of course,
everybody did it wrong. So he caught a lot of, BS from
what though? What was the reasoning?
That he recorded it and that people that are not certified and trained watch his video and they decided I can do it too. But like, isn't that the truth for like every video that we make?
Right.
Like the video from El Diablo of us cave exploring. Will people watch that video and be like, I'm gonna go cave exploring too? Like, where do you take responsibility for your actions and be like, okay, like even though somebody's doing it in a video, I have to make a decision.
It's literally ridiculous.
Yeah, and I feel bad about it because Jonathan Bird ended up taking the video down because he cares, obviously, about not what the cave diving community thinks, but he cares that other people like these guys could watch that video and think, I can do it too. He asked me for my opinion. I remember telling him, it's like, bro, like every video of somebody skydiving, whatever, doing things, people will make a decision on their own and be like, do I want to try this or not? Am I trained enough to do this or not?
But I mean, you could put a disclosure or add to the video, look, I'm going to record this, but this is super technical. We're trained for this. Don't do this.
Yeah.
Here's why you shouldn't do it.
Don't try this at
That's
home.
more valid, but just to flat out like blame him or make him pressure him to take it down is
yeah. He ended up taking it down.
I'm not surprised just because I know some of the people you may be talking about, and they have a God image.
Toxic. Yeah. These people are toxic. But anyway, I wanted to mention Jonathan Bird because, he made the decision to take the video down. But the one that was not taken down was our traverse with them, where we explain what we did. You can see the first dive where we set up the line to the surface, and you can see the whole thing.
I don't remember. Did we get any of the same kind of flack for not taking ours down? Not that we would, because we wouldn't.
No, of course not.
We didn't get any flack for it?
Well, we get flack for every video, so I don't.
Oh, okay.
That wasn't.
So it's a normal flack.
It's the normal, yeah. Everyone in the cave diving community is better than us, and we shouldn't be doing it. So we got that one going. But anyway, in case you haven't seen our traverse with Jonathan Bird, which I absolutely loved, and we're planning more collaborations with them.
Absolutely.
I'm going to leave it right here. Go check it out. Please don't exceed your training level.
Absolutely.
Just because you watch it in a video. Don't do it.
Of course. Never violate any of these rules. Bye, everybody.